12:06. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This is Devin Walker. Today is Monday, March the 18th, 2024. And we want to talk a little bit more about the Monopoly. If you saw my Monopoly post last week, part one, let me know your thoughts about that. Well, many of you all have. Many of you have commented on it. Some great feedback. Thank you so much. But I want to share some more with you. Now, I'm not going to give you part two. Part two is going to come to you later this week. So you got to stay tuned. You're going to love part two. So much information that I learned about this. And, you know, what was the song? I forgot the name of the group that had the song Games People Play. Games People Play. It sounded like the Isley Brothers, but it may not have been. I don't know who it was. But these are games that many of us have played for a long time. And so we want to continue learning a little bit about that. So let's talk a little bit about the game Monopoly. But first of all, you know, as you heard, the game was actually created. A lady by the name of they call her Lizzie McGee or Elizabeth McGee in 1907, I believe it was. And from what I mentioned in the first episode of this thing about the money, she never truly got the credit for it. Certainly didn't get paid for it. And so the part two is going to talk a little bit about what happened and how the game developed. We're going to talk a lot more about the Parker brothers. Really got to learn a little bit more about them in the second episode. But I love to talk about the game. I learned a lot of this from a good friend of ours, or a good friend of mine, who used to work with me at the Metropolitan Area Transit Authority. I worked there for 19 years in the field of equal employment opportunity. And we were in the Civil Rights Office, where you had, at that time, we had two departments only. There was the equal employment opportunity side that handled employment discrimination. And then you had the DBE side, which was disadvantaged business enterprise. And so while I was working in one, there was a gentleman named Carl Brown who worked in the other. In fact, he ended up becoming the manager of the CBE program, and their job was to help make sure that minority businesses receive their opportunities to do work for the Transit Authority here in Washington, D.C. Well, he left Metro. I left Metro back in 2018, and my wife and I, as we started developing our business, we went to the D.C. Small Business Development Center. That really is a free service. Every state has a small business development center. And each one of you all, if you're starting a business, you should reach out in your state for one of those organizations. But I digress. But this is the DC Small Business Development Center. And lo and behold, who was the manager? Carl Brown. And so Carl commented on our video on the Monopoly one, and just saying that, look, I was on an episode of the History Channel that focused on it. So, you know, I had to look it up. I looked it up and I saw Carl on it. It was an episode called The Toys That Made America. And you can find, you just Google it and type in Monopoly behind it. And it's an excellent documentary on the history of not only Monopoly, but they were also talking about all the games by Mattel, which, you know, the Mattel company, which created the game of life and all those types of things, and looking at the competition that they had. So it was great to see, because they just reinforced what we were talking about and what I've been talking about in that. But I'm going to add some additional information that they didn't talk about in segment number 2. So just hold on for a moment. Later on this week, you're going to tune into episode number 2, and we're going to talk a little bit more about it. But specifically, Elizabeth McGee created a board game, and she called it the Landlord's Game. And her goal was to really criticize capitalism and criticize how, you know, the landlords were monopolizing and were taking advantage of people. But according to even what I saw in that episode on the History Channel, she took it to Parker Brothers, and they didn't like it. They said they didn't think that they had a chance to succeed. But eventually, someone stole her idea. And all those names on the board made its way, it really came from a version of her game that was created by the Quakers. and they moved to Atlantic City. So all those, or the current Monopoly game is based upon where the gentleman stole the game from her and just took it to Parker Brothers. So that's why you see Baltic and Mediterranean streets are the first two streets of the game Monopoly, and they represented the desegregated part of, or the segregated part of Atlantic City at that time, and they are the two poorest places on the board. And so so anyway, it was great, and I love talking about the whole thing about Monopoly, because while many of us were playing a game, this game was reinforcing the principles and the values of what America is, a capitalistic society. Now, a monopoly, and I have a little definition here. Let's see, what did I do with it here? Oh, did it go away? A monopoly is pretty much something that held or owned exclusive ownership of a particular industry or a particular brand or something to that extent. And so I remember in the 1960s, I believe it was, there was a famous Supreme Court case called the Slaughterhouse Cases. And in the Slaughterhouse Cases that took place in Louisiana, there was the state of Louisiana granted one slaughterhouse pretty much the exclusive right to all the slaughtering of the, of course, when we say slaughter, we're talking about animals, talking about pigs and cows and all of that. And they gave it all to just one company. Well, someone sued and said that was a violation of their rights, that it should not be given all to one company. Well, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the slaughterhouse. And so that one slaughterhouse then was able to monopolize that particular industry. And you can imagine what it did to many people at that time. But in the 1800s, the mid 1800s up to the 1900s, this was the huge boom for monopolies to grow. This is when you started to see the beginnings of a lot of that. I believe at one point, maybe in 1850, there may have been only 9 millionaires in the United States. 30 years later, there were over 100-something millionaires. And so you just saw this huge boom, and the game became popular because, of course, people had the desire and the interest to be millionaires, and they can play a game that will visualize kind of their aspirations. And so so that particular game was real interesting. And then there's another documentary where I took a lot of my information from, where I received a lot of my information from, that was on PBS, and I've got to see if I can look that up. I should have had the name of that pulled up, but I will put it in my chat once we're done, or in the comments of the video once we're done. But an excellent documentary that also told that particular story. But the reason why it's significant now is that you fast forward 120 something years later, we have all of these industries that are just becoming smaller in terms of who's controlling what. And I really recognized that in 1991, back when the United States entered into the Iraqi war. There were a lot of theories that said that the only reason why the United States participated in that was not because of some dictator or not because of some injustice going on somewhere around the world, but because they wanted their hands on that oil. And so saying it is one thing, proving it is another. So at that particular time, I was in my protest stages in the black church. I was protesting the silence of the AME Zion church that I came out of at the time. But I had to be able, you can't just put these theories out without having evidence. So guess what Uncle Devin did? I actually did the research. Now this was long before there was any internet. There was none of that. I literally went to the library almost every day, and I went and dug into the microfiche, the fish, and the Duns and Bradley books, and literally looked at the top 5 aerospace defense contractors, media outlets, and oil companies at that time. And then once I looked at those top 5, Then I went and looked at their board of directors. Who was on their board of directors? Who were their CEOs? I looked at every last one of them. By the time I did all that, I probably had looked up over 130, 140 different people. But then, once I identified who they were, then I wanted to know what organizations they belonged to. Who, what were their affiliations? I had a theory that they all were connected, that their public face is different than their private face. Well, sure enough, as I started digging, I started realizing that the vast majority of them all belong to the same type of organizations, whether it was the Business Roundtable, whether it was the Council of Foreign Relations, whether it was the Trilateral Commission, whether it was so many different groups that they had. I can't think of all of the Business Economic Roundtable, I think it was. And then I discovered that in the media, the reason why the media was pro-war in the Iraqi war in 1991 was that because it was a business decision. The same people that owned CBS and NBC and the Washington Post and all those were the same ones that owned these the aerospace defense contractors who will be making the vast majority of the money. And they were also connected with the oil companies. And I believe, if I recall it right, it was only 5, by the time I looked at everything, there were just 5 families that controlled 80% of the media that people were looking into. Now, you can have access to this if you like. I wrote all of this up. I have a newsletter. I meant to get a copy of my Kemet report, the physical copy, to be able to show you. It's upstairs in the box, but I will share that research. I mean, and this was just raw data. The first thing was just raw data. It was no opinion, no nothing. So you can see the names. You can see the names of all these politicians, all these corporate individuals, all these major players in business who were part of these companies. And it started making sense, like, oh, that's how this is all happening. So we're talking about Monopoly. We're talking about the game Monopoly in real life. The game of Monopoly in real life. And so part of me doing this whole series on the game Monopoly was, I'm sure everyone has played it. And if you've ever played the game, there's probably somebody right now you can't stand because they were so aggressive. They didn't care. They were ruthless. They didn't care if you went to jail. They didn't care if you were, yeah, that was you, Kimberly, I know. There were so many people that were just ruthless in the game. But it taught us some serious lessons. And so for me to really be able to do this game was a lot of fun. And they cheated, yes, right. And I think my wife told me that she used to play it and people were cutting side deals, and so now you start really getting to the heart of the fact that there was a society that was created that allowed for 1 or 2 or 3 people to control the vast majority of what was going on. And it's not really uncommon. Let me see if I can find this without being too distracting. I have an article here that, let me see what we say. Yes, side deals. Yes, so they were very cutthroat. But let's take a look at this right now, here in 2024. Oh, you prefer the game of life over Monopoly, Ruby? Okay. Now, what I just learned last night, the game of life was created by the Mattel Corporation. Mattel and the Parker brothers were rivals. I'm going to have to do some additional information about that, but the game of life was, when board games first started, the vast majority of board games were more about morals. You had the Puritans in this country and the religious folks that wanted games that will reinforce their positive or their versions of it. So the game of life, the original version, actually really talked. It had an end to it, where you would go to a certain spot, or you have to make certain decisions, and not just the game of life, but there were so many other games that they had at the time where if you chose this virtue, then you'll get to go 4 steps back, but if you landed on something that they considered was a negative, generally something that was, you know, you know what I'm saying, just different things that were in society, then you would take some steps back. And the original Game of Life actually had a slot from what I saw in the video on the History Channel, where you landed on it. It was called suicide. I know I shouldn't say that word on it, but that's really what it was. And so eventually that game didn't do well at all until almost 100 years later. It wasn't until 100 years later that they had the game Life, and what made Life different than Monopoly was that it was in 3D. If you remember the game, you had the little toggle thing that you spin, but you had little bridges you go up and all these different things. So they marketed it so that you can look at it in that regard. But yeah, the Game of Life was something that was huge, and but there was a rivalry between Mattel and Parker Brothers. And I'm not going to say much more because you got to see part 2 or the other parts of for Monopoly, and then I'll share some more information. But the reason why that game Monopoly was so important was that it again reinforced where we are today. Right now, I'm just looking here at my computer, the world's top 26 billionaires, okay, I want you to listen, the world's top 26 billionaires now own as much as the poorest 3.8 billion people in the world. Let's slow that down for a minute. So 26 billionaires, just 26 people, they own as much as the poorest 3.8 billion people. This is the heart of the problem that we have in this world, that it's created to allow this type of inequality to exist. And so for me, I'm just so grateful. I don't try to make people feel that I think I'm better than or anything like that. I may have done it when I was younger. I had to learn my arrogance and all, but I was so grateful that someone taught me, and in fact, I remember learning this after listening to Kwame Ture, formerly Stokely Carmichael, speak, where he said that that there are two paths that society can go, and there's only two paths. One where the means of production, that is all your land and your resources, both human and material, are either used to benefit the small group of people or the masses of the people. And then each one of us have to determine which side that we're fighting for. That cleared up so much for me, because then I started to understand that the issues that we were involved with was bigger than race, was bigger than sex. It was also class. And so I started looking at the class issue, and it was at that time that I realized that my purpose in life was to try to help be a part of the process to change that inequality. 26 billionaires now owns as much as the poorest 3.8 billion people. And sorry, go Duval, go UMBC. But what I learned also was that Africa was one of the richest continents, if not the richest continent on Earth. But her people, no matter where people are, either on the continent or in the diaspora, here in the United States, in Haiti, in South America, in Asia, wherever we are among the poorest people. There's only one way that can happen. That is not natural. There's nobody that wakes up in their right mind and says, oh, you know what? I think I'm going to be poor today. No one wakes up with that idea in their mind. They've been educated in a certain way to accept certain conditions, or by fraud and force, they've been conditioned to this particular situation. So if the continent, the physical continent, is one of the richest in the world, but her people are the poorest, then for me, I realized that my goal in life is to change that. That is my change. That is my goal. if you think about what you will see in part two is someone flipping the script on the game Monopoly. You're gonna see a little bit about that. Again, I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, but to be honest, if you change that order, if now Africa controls its own means of production and to the benefit of people of those lands, then what you have is really you're replacing an old order. In this case, it's only under a capitalist society that can exist. Then you must get rid of that order, but you have to replace it with something else. Because if you got rid of that order and then put something similar to it, all you've done is reform. That's all you've done is reform. So now we're looking at changing things, and that's really what my whole life purpose is, and one of the purposes that I decided to do this whole thing about Monopoly, because it was very intriguing to me. I mean, it's a board game again that's so popular, and I see Geraldine is watching. Geraldine, did you ever watch the game? I'm sure you ever played the game. I can see you and Jamia and Daniel playing it now. I don't know who would be more ruthless than that. Yes, and so it's about to get crazier. Kenya and Kenya to help Haiti. Well, that's not happening. And see, there's more to that. I can talk about that because the Supreme Court in Kenya has denied the Kenyan troops through the United Nations to go into Haiti, which I think is good, because that would mean the United States is again having their hands in Haiti, which has been the basis of the problem of our people in Haiti. I don't want to digress too much on that, but what you see right now, even in Africa, there are a number of countries that are starting now to wipe off the yoke of Western societies and their ideas. Burkina Faso, Niger, what was the other one? I can't think of the other one. Gracious, I can't think of the other one offhand. It'll come back to me. But you see a lot of them now are really have come into themselves and are looking to, develop Africa for Africa. But likewise, wherever we are, you see these movements that are moving forward. So yes, and France. Matter of fact, those were French-speaking countries in Africa that are telling France no more. I don't know where they came up with this thing that France was a city of love. Well, not if you're a person of color. What France has done to colonize a lot of the earth, African countries and more. I don't get it, and it is definitely not there. So anyway, this game Monopoly is a part of life. It is, no pun intended on that. And I enjoy sharing it with you, and I hope that you can just give us a couple more days. We're going to release part 2 of this, and if there's something else that you have an idea about, let me know. See, I'm a researcher. I love doing the research and learning more, and especially learning something every day. If you don't learn something every day, I consider that a day wasted. If you don't laugh every day, I consider that a day wasted. And if you don't love every day, I consider that a day wasted. So we got to make sure that we learn, laugh, and love. Okay, that to me is where we need to be. So nonetheless, I just wanted to come here today to share a little bit about that with you. I'm looking to see if there's any other comments. I'm not able to see comments in Facebook. So if there's anything there, Lolita, if you want to read them out, you can, but I don't see anything in Facebook. Well, actually, I can pull it up on my computer. And while we do that, I am Devin Walker, Uncle Devin, the children's drumcussionist. Make sure that you tune into my YouTube page. I have 2 YouTube pages. One is for children, and the other one is for adults. Okay, I see you, Geraldine. Okay, so you played it as a child, and we didn't more stealing each other's money. I want to know who did the stealing, though. That's what I want to know. But we have 2 YouTube pages. Evolving with Uncle D. This is for my grown-ups. Some of you all have grown up with me starting when you were a child. And I've been doing this now close to, I don't know, over 12 years now or more. And so there's some other greater content based upon the lessons that I was instilling through my music that we can now talk about. So if you go to the YouTube page and look up Evolving with Uncle D, make sure you subscribe and like, because we're going to be talking a lot more about, this is where we're going to be sharing a lot of our videos, but we're going to go into where we can get into a greater discussion about a lot of these different things. And then, of course, for the children, there is Uncle Devin Show, Devin. So Uncle Devin Show, you can go and you'll see more children content on that particular page. And I pulled my computer out close
Just
to
building.
Okay.
She said they played it as a child and we didn't. We're stealing each other's. They did more stealing each other's money.
Yeah, that's the fun thing about the game. But now, what I also recognize, the beauty of board games is that it brings people together. It brings families together. It brings people where you can communicate with it, and it can be used. Thank you for that great history class. But it can be used as a great learning tool for everyone. So don't throw away those games. Those games are still popular. Monopoly has sold over, I think, 300 billion copies. It's in over 120 countries. And it's done in over 40 different languages. So this game is very popular. So we're going to talk a little bit more about changing things in our next episode. And I say version 2, but in part 2 of our video.
How old were you when you were doing the Kemet reports?
Okay. Question is, how old was I when I was doing the Kemet reports? I was about 20, 21 years old when I started doing the Kemet reports. The Kemet reports, for those who may not know, the word Kemet is another name for Egypt. Okay, it went by different names at times. Sometimes it was Nubia, sometimes it was Alkebulan. Well, Alkebulan is the full name of Africa, but the word Kemet was for Egypt. And I knew that many times, much of our understanding of the world was based on what was told to us by our former slave masters. So, for example, it said that the specific history of Europe became the general history of everyone else through colonialism, through chattel slavery, through fraud, and through force. So that way, whatever their history was, we automatically knew it because we were not allowed to learn our history, and we were subjugated underneath those rules of the Dutch and the Portuguese and the French and the British and America and the like. And so based on the fact that the specific history of Europe became the general history of everyone else, when I was in college, I discovered that, okay, well, Greece is the foundation of Western civilization or European civilization. That's why you have all the, think about it. Why do you think we always have all these Greek letter fraternities and sororities? Well, that's because in white culture, their highest level of knowledge went to the Greeks because that was their history. But it wasn't the highest level of knowledge for us as African people because the Greeks learned everything that they gained from Egypt, from Kemet, from Africa. In fact, they considered the language and the knowledge now that is widespread, they considered it foreign. They arrested their leaders. They arrested Socrates. They arrested all these different people because they thought it was foreign to their understanding, their way of life. And so at that time when I was 20, 21, I said, well, I needed to go beyond European civilization because there was civilizations that existed thousands of years before Europe was even developed to what we know it today. So I created the Kemet Report, and I was 20, 21 years old, and that was part of my my effort to educate the black church about our true origins. I wasn't trying to change nobody's religious beliefs or philosophy. It wasn't about that. In fact, I considered that I was helping to enhance it, because the more we knew and the more we understood the origin of many different things, I thought that, and I knew that people's faith and people's spirituality would increase. So that was the Kemet Report, and I will. I should have had, it was a big orange document, and I love that document. I mean, I started doing research and putting it out in these small little newsletters, no more than about 8-9 pages. It was packed full of knowledge, and just like you all are doing on the social media posts. Back then, before there was social media, before there was the internet, there was just mailing. And so I started getting subscriptions from people all around the world. I mean, Jamaica, all throughout the United States. The State Historical Society of Wisconsin took out a subscription. I didn't even know black folks were in Wisconsin back then. I didn't know much about U.S. Activity at the time. But I started now doing newsletters talking about monopolies. The media lords was one of them, the great deceivers of the earth. Another article that I did, and I'll talk about this at another time, was the politics of food. How two families controlled 60% of all the grain that was distributed in the world. I named those companies. I think it was Cargill Incorporated and Continental. I can't think of what Continental name is, but I looked at the history of it and saw how they shifted our eating patterns just to make money. The vast majority of this country, people ate, the majority of the food they ate was vegetables. That's what was grown. Beans, all those types of things. But when they discovered that they could make more money taking those beans and giving it to the cows and giving it to the cattle and giving it to the chickens, and they could make more money doing that, they had the money and the influence over the USDA, and the USDA changed its eating pyramid. You ever see the USDA eating pyramid? They changed it where we went from a majority plant-based diet to a majority meat-eating diet. And once they did that, you started seeing cancer rates go up. You started seeing diabetes go up. You started seeing all these different changes in people's lives. And then you started seeing the monopoly in the food industry. And that's a whole nother topic that I think, Kimberly, yes, we will have to pick that up. We can talk about the monopolies in food. And now we can see the relationship from a game to reality. For us, it's a game. For these thugs that run it, it's a business. And they use these concepts to reinforce their thoughts and their ideas. So next, part 2, we're going to talk about alternative ideas. What's an alternative idea to monopoly? Stay tuned. We're going to share that later on this week. And we will have some more fun with that. So thank you all so much. I'm not going to keep you too much longer on this beautiful Monday. Make sure you get out. Give me 15 minutes a day doing something. Just walking, get that cardiovascular system going. I mean, do you know how marvelous this body is? I think the blood, I think we got enough blood vessels in our body that if we stretch them out, it'll wrap around the world twice, each one of us. But yet blood can circulate in our body a few minutes at a time. That's how much of a beauty that we are as a people. So check us out. And also, while you're on our YouTube page, remember, go to YouTube, check out Evolving with Uncle D, and please take a look at my new music video called Move the Money. Talking about monopoly. Move the Money. How the United States is spending the vast majority of its money on military than it is on social programs. $868 billion that was given to the military. And they continue, it's a record. It's never been that much before in this history, while they're constantly cutting all these programs. They're in over 180 something countries, 75 countries around the world, with I forget how many, over 750 military bases. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. for those, I just say, I grew up believing in the Prince of Peace, so there was no way that I could support the King of War. And so go to the video, check it out. I want to thank the Veterans for Peace for posting it on their website. Thank you, Veterans for Peace. That was great. I also want to thank, there's a coalition in New York called Move the Money New York City Coalition. It's about 60 different organizations that have been petitioning the City Council of New York to pass a Move the Money bill. See, I didn't even know they existed. They saw a video and immediately contacted me, and so now we're working together. But their goal is to get their city to pass that resolution to make sure that the emphasis is placed on people, not profits. We need, what did I just say? We need beats, not bombs. And so that's where, we were really focusing on. So I want to thank them. I can't think of the brother's name, but a musician up in Detroit saw it, invited me to come to one of their jam sessions, one of the oldest jam sessions in Detroit, and said they want to cover the song. And I said, sure, please do. Thank you so much. But please share it, like it, and we can keep moving from there. So I'm going to end it here. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful Saturday. And if you have any questions or any thoughts or ideas about anything that we talked about, please let me know. It's Monday. What did I say?
Saturday.
Did I say Saturday? Oh, Lord. I sure enough said Saturday. I don't know what's going on. So I think it's time for a nap. What you think? I think so. All right, let me get out of here. But if you have any comments or questions, let me know, and we'll be in contact with you all soon. And just remember, life is a drum, so beat it.